Welcome, everybody, to our latest episode of Vox Vomitus, also known as Word Vomit. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, author of Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, and From Daylight to Madness. Joining me this week, as always, are my two Vox Vomitus vixens, Allison Martine, author of the Bourbon books, and Trisha Mckee, author of the Beyond series. We are thrilled today to have with us Miss Nancy Bilyeau. Nancy, welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'm very excited to be doing this with you. It's a great invite.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your work.
Sure. I'm a Midwesterner. I was born in Chicago, grew up in Michigan, and then I wanted to be a newspaper reporter or a magazine editor. I ended up as a magazine editor, so I had to move to New York City. That's where the business was. And I worked at a bunch of different magazines, everything from Rolling Stone to Good Housekeeping. And then I segued into writing stories. I did some screenwriting, and then about 15 years ago, I started working on my first novel, The Crown. It took me 5 years. And then I wrote a trilogy for Touchstone. The Crown stars a Dominican novice. So she's in reign of Henry VIII, going through all kinds of terrible experiences. And then I wrote The Blue, which is a standalone espionage thriller set in the porcelain and art world. So everybody loves the cover. I'll show you the cover. Yeah. And then most recently I wrote Dreamland, which is set in Coney Island in 1911, which is a suspense story of an heiress who gets into all kinds of trouble when she strays from her luxury hotel to Sodom by the Sea, which is, they called it Coney Island. So I was just
telling, so my fiance was asking me the other day what I was reading, and I'm reading Dreamland. And he was like, what is it about? And I said, the easiest way for me to describe it is American Downton Abbey, but with murders.
Yay!
And he said, this, yeah. He's like, this must be your new favorite book. Because I was like, it has everything I love. Day drinking, terraces, the beach, murders, cocktail,
Right? Some debauchery, some rich people who don't deserve what they have, but they don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
so familiar sometimes.
Men behaving badly.
Very badly.
Oh.
Trisha's like, you had me at men behaving badly.
Yes. Oh, I love to write behaving men.
So I am probably about 75% of the way through this book, and I want to say, don't tell me the ending, but you must be an impeccable researcher, because it seems your world that you're building is so authentic. Can you tell me about your research process?
Well, I guess because of the journalism background, I did pick up some tricks in reporting, and I actually do things a little differently than some novelists, and then I do kind of report my books when I make calls. Like when I was doing my first 3 books, I sent an email to contact us at the Tower of London, and I started bugging them. They said contact us. So
if they didn't mean it, they shouldn't have put it in there.
Yeah, if they didn't want to be bothered by this nosy, obnoxious American, they should put it in there. So for Dreamland, I read a few books on Coney Island at the turn of the century, and then I went there. Of course, there's hardly anything left from that time because they demolishing and not understanding that they should preserve history. I went to Coney Island Museum, Tenement Museum, and then what was really helpful for this book was that I got newspaper articles. I got the New York Times. I signed up for their Going Back in Time service, and I read the newspapers that came out during the days of the summer in which I wrote, so I could kind of really suck in the atmosphere. They call what I do atmosphere porn. That I really like to create atmosphere.
I love it.
Your world building is amazing. And the thing I wanted to bring up was, I feel like, and this is going to sound like a weird thing, but the weather is like another character in your story. Good. The oppressive heat. Like I was, it might have just been me having a hot flash though, but I was reading it and I could feel the heat wave. And I loved it so much. Are you a weather nerd?
Yes. Yes. In fact, my son wants to be a meteorologist, so I guess this is genetic.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I did find out after I started writing it that there was one of the worst heat waves of the 20th century was that summer. So then I sort of redid everything and amped that up. And I was reading stuff that was really terrifying. Like there was no air conditioning and almost no fans. And yet there were so many people crowded in New York. That's when you had all the immigration, like 1 million every couple of years were coming in these tiny tenements with no fans or air conditioning. And so people were, they were jumping into the river even though they couldn't swim. They were shooting themselves. I mean, they were really like going nuts. It was like totally insane. And it kept going and going for like 11 days. And then the New England too, it got really, really, really bad. They still don't know exactly, you know, they have theories, but it got, the suffering was intense. So I couldn't resist all the details of the suffering.
Well, it's like people trying to escape a burning building, but the burning building is their entire state.
Yes,
so
yes.
You did some strange things.
It was breaking them psychologically, the unrelenting heat. And what was interesting is the people who were dying, a lot of them were the firefighters and the police and the doctors who were on the front lines, of trying to help. So I thought was interesting. It wasn't necessarily the old people, although some of them did go, but it was a lot of the people who were outside and just would die of heat stroke, So it was quite horrifying, and I was glad when it was over myself. And so, it was good to work. Well, I try to do that. I try to bring in drama, although all of my protagonists have all been fictional, but I sometimes weave in real people too, because it's fun. And I want to entertain the readers.
Well, yeah, those are like people Easter eggs then when you go,
yes, I do people Easter eggs. With my trilogy, I was sort of nervous about writing Henry VIII because all of these big shot novelists were doing it, and I had to work my way up to it. So in the first book, he has a very small part. The second, it's a little bit. And the third, finally, I manned up, if you can say that, past tense, manned up, and I wrote some Henry VIII chapters. So I had to make him my Henry VIII, not Jonathan Rhys Meyers, not.
I was going to say that one is the one I have to do this for. If you say Jonathan Rhys Meyers,
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm probably going to lose a lot of, if Tudor readers watch this, and a lot of them are very faithful to facts and very purist. So they'll be disappointed, but I enjoy that series. I really do. And I think that Michael Hurst, the filmmaker, gets at some essential truths about these people whilst bending and stretching. And because I've done some screenwriting, I know that you simply cannot, it's not a documentary. You have to make some changes. You have to cut and add. But it's hard for the purists.
Anytime I take liberties, I would say historically, with my work, my fiance and I always joke that I'm doing it Tudor style, meaning Tudors, the TV show, like where I'm like, I know it's not right, but it works a lot more. It's much more interesting.
I mean, people get so upset that Henry VIII had 2 sisters and he made him one, things like that, and had her can't kill her older husband when actually the King of France just died. But it did make for very good drama.
Exactly. I think you can get away with a lot in the service of a better narrative. And as long as you're not presenting it as there will be a history test on this later, you're fine.
Right. Well, what people get upset, they say that that readers who just read historical fiction then have all of these mistakes in their mind. They think they're true. But it's just like, really? Is that my fault? It says novel. It says novel.
It says novel. Big letters.
Yep. I see somebody's drinking, so should I start to...
Yes, you should start drinking.
I brought Madeira.
We'll all cheers.
Which is a fancy wine from this was made on the island of Madeira, which is, like 300 miles off Morocco. And it's a big tourist destination. It's also kind of a sinister place. But this wine is in the blue, and it's what sophisticated people would have. Not saying I'm sophisticated.
I was just going to ask.
You're not either.
So here we go. But, the regular people would sort of drink gin in England or rum in the American colonies. But so for all of them, cheers.
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 Oh, it's sweet. It's really good. I have to pace myself or else I'm going to embarrass you all.
You were saying it was kind of is it kind of like
please.
cherry in flavor for people who haven't had it?
It's very, very sweet, and there's a tiny bit of caramely in it.
Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think I need that. Yeah.
It's like a brandy. It's like a port. It's very distinctive. Supposedly what would happen is the Europeans would stock up barrels from that island for the long voyage across the Atlantic. And some of them would be exposed to heat. And when you expose this to heat, that makes it actually taste much better.
Yeah.
So now they artificially heat it up and then cool it down. They have this whole process to imitate. Yeah, it's making a bit of a comeback. And I found it at the local store. It's not like
I wanted the story that you went to Madeira and came back with this and had to smuggle it through customs, like under your shirt.
Oh,
Yeah.
I should have had it.
And then you saved it.
That's what I went through. Yeah, I almost got arrested just so that I could hold up this, Madeira.
You're
Yes,
We're
Madeira.
gonna come up with a good story here.
Yeah.
Nancy got Madeira.
So, Trisha, I saw your eyes light up when Nancy said the words Rolling Stone.
Yes.
Do you, I'm sure you have other questions, but now I'm curious why your eyes lit up so much. But I know you're a rock and roll girl, so.
Oh, good.
Yes, it's one of my favorite magazines.
Oh,
Can you
good.
tell us more about your experience
Sure,
with Rolling
sure.
Stones? I'd love to
Well,
hear it.
Yeah. I was when I was in high school in Livonia, Michigan, all I cared about was music. And I just was obsessed with buying albums. I had posters on my walls. I just went to, actually snuck into a Bob Seger concert in Michigan, and God knows when. So, yeah. And then what happened was I was in my magazine career. I was at Mademoiselle, no longer with us, but like a glamour, junior glamour magazine. And I heard there was an opening at Rolling Stone, and I thought, I have to try because that's like so important to me. So I did get an interview, and I was able to get the job. I was an assistant editor. I have laboriously, if you know all the titles I've had, I was an editorial assistant, then I was an assistant editor, then I was an associate editor, then I was a senior editor, each one took like a year. But so then I got to Rolling Stone, and what happened was that's when, and I felt really bad about Eddie Van Halen because Van Halen was big during this time. We're talking the early 90s, grunge was coming in, rap was coming in, but the owner, Jan Wenner, still was very tied to 60s and 70s rock. So there's all these tensions there. But so I worked there for 2 years, and I worked really hard. I worked because we had a lot of ads then, sniff, sob. It was the heyday of the 90s was the heyday of newsstand magazines, consumer magazines. And so I loved, it was always a labor of love because I love pop culture. I love rock music. And I actually got to interview just one person myself. It was MC Hammer. I did interview MC Hammer. I don't think I thought about that in years. And he had just bought race horses, and he wanted to talk about that. It was really weird. He made a lot of money, and he lost all his money doing stuff like buying race horses. But can't stop doing. So it was really fun. And I also, because I worked for the film editor, Peter Travers, who's still, really great force in movie criticism, he let me do it, and I got to interview Gabriel Byrne in person. So that was fun. He was very, very smart, very well read, very moody. Yeah, it was really.
Did you get to touch him?
No.
Curiosity?
I did say this really kind of weird thing because he's very private, and he was married to Ellen Barkin then, and he was sort of tired of people probing, and I was just asking, I thought, respectful questions, but he said in his Irish accent, which I will not try to imitate, he said, "Isn't this an interesting process that you can ask me any question that you want, but I'm not allowed to ask you anything?" And I said, "Well, ask."
Go ahead.
I I mean, he laughed. And that helped.
You can ask me to marry you. You can ask
any questions you have. So he laughed. But so those were my only 2 interviews. Most of the time I was editing. I was mostly a magazine editor. I did go to some rock concerts, but because I was at a low level, if I went through the magazine, it would always be really bad seats. So I saw
get good seats.
I saw Neil Young almost behind the stage. Yeah, really bad seats because I wasn't one of the stars. I was what they call the shock troops. I was actually copy editing a lot, and they were very, very high standards. The magazine had very high standards on grammar, usage, punctuation, clarity, everything.
Well, our friend Lori just commented that she thought it was very cool that MC Hammer, you got to talk to him. So that might be the one you got. It's one worth sharing.
Yay! Well,
we also had a comment. We also had a comment towards the beginning of the show. Somebody we know, his name is Christian Teague. He considers himself, and he is a historian and a Victorianologist. So when you were talking about your world building and how you treat it like reporting, he had commented that he thought that was a really incredible way to build the world, like reporting on it. So
yeah.
So thank you, Lori and Christian.
Good. That's great. Well, maybe my way is. I mean, it works for me. It's sort of strange to other people when they hear that I make phone calls and to libraries and bug people. But I just find that what I try to do is I try to seed in the details. So when you're like in Dreamland, I took it to because I have so many primary sources to take from, I could really take it to the limit. So I wanted you to feel when you're on the beach that you could feel the grit of the sand in your toes, that you could smell, the ocean and the fishies, and also it's really important. Coney Island really had a powerful odor of hot dogs and beer and body
I was
sweat.
waiting for the food.
Yeah. So I tried to get, and the music, there was always a lot of music. And people were very loud and screaming their heads off. And so I try to get all of the sensory going. So when you're reading the book, you are a tiny, when she first goes there, she feels a little overwhelmed. And I wanted the reader to get that a little too, that's like so much is coming at her. Mm-hmm. If you think of the first time you went to amusement park, I know I was overwhelmed. I'm a roller coaster person. And that's another reason I think I wanted to write it. I find amusement parks really interesting.
Love it.
What is your favorite roller coaster? Do you have one?
Yeah. Six Flags. I can't remember the name of it. But
Which one? Because they're all over.
The one in
New
Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah. And it had a roller coaster. It had a name like, Maniac or something like that. But what would happen is you would totally go so slow to the top. Click, 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 and then you're hovering and you look down and it's just, and then and just that suspense of that going up to the top and you're checking your straps, and you're hanging there for a second, and then and also the collective screaming as you all go down and scream, all these strangers screaming together. It makes me sound like I'm a little disturbed, but I'll have more Madeira, but yeah. I just think that's something people are drawn to. And there was this theory about Coney Island that, there were a lot of people working in the factories under pretty terrible conditions in 1911. And those were the people who were flooding there on Sunday, which was, sometimes they didn't even get Saturday off, but they always got Sunday off. And they would flood there to sort of have escapism, but also to be jolted out of the experience of what they were doing. That only something like Coney Island could really, shake them.
Yeah.
Get through. And also it was a time when sort of the Downton Abbey Edwardian gender stuff was breaking down a little, and people were flirting and grabbing each other and so forth. So Coney Island was like a place where that was happening. That's why they called it Sodom by the Sea. You know, the people were very disapproving.
And it was also this, like you said earlier, there was this incredible influx of immigrants to our country.
Right.
So there were people, specifically, I'm thinking about one of the characters in your book, Stefan, and he's from the Baltic area. Yeah. And to him, all of Coney Island is a beautiful paradise because it is every choice you could make. And then there are people who are like, oh, I like it because it's sleazy. And what happens when those two people meet? You know, I love that.
Well, he was part of this real group of artists, the Futurists. A lot of them were from Italy, who worshipped the new. They loved machines. They loved, you know, bridges and skyscrapers. And while, you know, it's fashionable to be like, oh, noise, dirt, horrible. These people saw it as this is our future's really exciting. We have machines. We're driving. We're going to be flying. You know, to them it was something worth painting, and it's a much different mindset than what you have now. Although maybe some people are still excited about the future. So, not this today, maybe.
Yeah, maybe not right now.
Not right now. Not today.
Yeah.
Not today, but that's why we have our cocktails.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, when we're looking at the future of which choice of apocalypse we have, that's not as exciting as futurist. So, it's perspective. It matters.
Exactly.
So, Nancy, we have come to the point in our show where we've talked about how great of a writer you are. But the name of the show is Vox Vomitus. It is word vomit. So now we've got to get to something embarrassing. I mean, we're not going to ask you hard-hitting questions. Just things like, what is the worst thing you've ever written and why?
Well, I mean, I was interested in your show is the word vomit, because screenwriters have this thing called the vomit draft. And what it is, it's like you have to get it out. You have to do a first draft, even if it's so bad that when you're reading it, you want to vomit at your own horrible ineptitude and just terrible choices. But you have to get the vomit draft done so then you can revise it. Mm-hmm. So, but my dilemma is sometimes what I think is not working and is terrible people like, but what is kind of much worse is sometimes I think something's going well and it's not. So, like the first fiction workshop I went to, I got into fiction because I had a friend who was in one where there were 4 people and they would read pages and they had a leader, and then they would critique each other's pages, sitting in a small room in the West Village, and they needed a 4th. Somebody dropped out, so they said, "Do you want to?" My friend said, and I said, "I'll try it." So then I said, "Okay, well, I love Tudor England. Maybe I'll try to write a historical mystery." So I came up with some pages and I read them before I went in. I thought it was pretty good. And so then it was a totally different protagonist, totally different story. And I read it out loud and there was just this silence. Of just like, what? That wasn't good. That wasn't interesting. That was just weird and dull, and I was very surprised.
Wait, it was both weird and dull?
Weird and dull is not
weird and dull. And so there's always the first shock when you write something that sucks, and it's painful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then most of the time, I will then go away back to my hole in the ground, and I will slowly start to think about some of the criticism and slowly start to think, okay, maybe there's something to this. And then I will come back out and I'll be like, okay, boom, 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 like MC Hammer. I'll be very, willing to do anything. But once in a while, it's just too much, right? If you get really bad criticism, you're like, I suck. So anyway, then I went away and then I came back with, and also that was third person. And it was male protagonists, and I really just cannot write male protagonists. I can't. I want to. I can't. So then I went away and I came up with a woman who became Joanna Stafford, and I did it first person. The person who did the workshop suggested I try that, and it was great advice. Then I was able to do something that maybe what needed a lot of work, but did not make people feel repulsed. So, which is good. It's the goal. So then I worked on it for 5 years, and I worked on it a lot. And, sometimes I felt it was just really, the first book was super hard because I had done, 5 years on and off, but I kept coming back to it and torturing my husband about, complaining all the time about it. And at one point I said to myself, nobody asked you to do this. Why am I doing this? But then I would find workshops where people were kind, and then, and also probably one of my crutches is to do tons and tons of research to make it super interesting, while I'm trying to make the characters as good as I can and try and work on suspense. And so finally I got it, through more workshopping than you can imagine. Then I got my first agent. But I continued to do this. The Blue, I had a different agent then, and I had a beta reader, and I'd written really the first 1/3. And I'm reading it and I'm like, yeah. And I sent it to my agent, and she called me and said, well, I don't think any of it's working. I was just like, oh my God.
She didn't think any of it was working.
No. And I said, she said, well, we could talk about what we think in here we could salvage. And I said, look, you still like the basic idea? Oh yeah, I love the basic idea. I don't like where you started, and I don't like these other characters. I like the main. So I said, why don't I just start over? And so I did. And that's partly my magazine background, where you do a lot of revision. As a magazine editor, I've been the person who's put people through so many revises. Sometimes it's not always my idea. My boss is saying, more changing, but so I didn't feel like I could do that, and not do it myself. So I am willing to make changes, but it's kind of, it strikes you off balance when you think, and then somebody else reads it and they're like, no. Yeah. So that's why I always have a beta reader, and I still do some workshopping, because even though I think I know how to do a story, I think I know how to write characters, and I follow a certain kind of outline, but I feel like sometimes what I think it is just really different from what it is. And I don't know if it's I'm in my own world, so I need a check, a creativity check.
So, Timothy Miller just commented that he wanted another Joanna Stafford book. I think that's probably TikTok. No. But Nancy, what you were saying was actually something I think I was talking with Allison and Trisha about earlier today and every day, is that when we're writing, we get to that point where you think, I'm a genius. I'm going to win an award. And then the next paragraph, you think, what am I doing? Does anybody want to read this? I don't know. I mean, They might not. But I find that I get lost in my own language, and I'm like, this is so good. And then somebody else, my beta reader, will circle it and be like, this does not matter to your plot. And I'm like, oh, true.
Oh, I've been fighting the info dump wars, all along. I try not to do it. But on the other side, I do need to get cool information in there. And I'm not one of those pure dialogue people where it's just action dialogue. I do like to get this other stuff in there that's cool and interesting and whatever. But and then not only, so you have to deal with your beta readers and your agents and your workshop friends, and so then you finally get it out there, and sometimes then you have to deal with the the readers, and sometimes I'm really surprised by something that they don't get or they don't like. And of course, you're very appreciative when they do get it, But like with some of the, like, I just have to share with you, I got a 1 star on this novella that I wrote, The Ghost of Madison Avenue. The Ghost of Madison Avenue. And the 1 star was, I don't like historical fiction with a ghost in it. It's like, I wasn't hiding it. I wasn't hiding it. So you have to be ready for that. I mean, you must know. I was going to ask for, like, with supernatural or ghosts, like, some people just love it and some people just really don't.
I'll say my favorite bad review was my very first bad review, of which I've gotten plenty since then, of my debut novel, which is about a man whose wife and son die in a car accident, and he's searching for, like, retribution on a haunted island. And my bad review, one of my bad reviews was, this was so depressing. I didn't want to read a sad book. But the blurb is, and a young alcoholic loses his wife and son in a car accident, and he slowly, like, descends into madness. And I'm like, what part of that not being a fun, uplifting read did you know? But it's fine. I appreciate all the people.
Yeah, no, but I know. And I read all my reviews. I know a lot of people who.
Oh, that was going to be my question to you. If you still read them all.
Oh yeah. And I think that I would say in like 80% of them, there's something of merit there, something to listen to. There is something.
And the other 20?
Well, it's like, why is there a ghost in the Ghost of or it says on Amazon, The Ghost of Madison Avenue, a novella, and they're like, I didn't know this was a novella.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. It's always, it's always good. Again, my first bad review talked about how bad the book was, but then it said, the ending tied it all together. And I was like, yes, they got to the end.
Yay!
You finished
That's
it.
Good.
So sometimes you just hold on to those things.
Right.
Hold them tight.
Hold them tight.
Nancy, I wanted to know how hard your eyes rolled when you saw somebody upset that there was a ghost in a book about a ghost. Like,
when it's the title.
Really. Yeah, speechless. I wanted to do something with a ghost, and my first 3 books have a little bit of supernatural in each one. The Crown, the Chalice, and the Tapestry. They each have a little bit of mysticism. I love that whole relic, poison chalice stuff. I wanted to play with that. The Blue and Dreamland do not. There's no. So then I kind of wanted to do something with that. I love a ghost story.
So did this person think like the ghost was a metaphor for something else, and they didn't think there would be an actual ghost in it based on your prior reading, or
I thought it was a figurative ghost. I don't know.
Yeah.
The ghost was an allegory. I got nothing.
I know.
That's when you drink your Madeira and you go, whatever, 1 star. At least you bought my book.
Yeah.
Royalties are royalties.
Yeah, you hope they didn't get it from the library. You're like, please say you at least paid for the book.
Yeah, I think they did. It said verified purchase, right?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
We need our reviews. We'll take them, even if they're 1 star.
So we are almost out of time, but I do want to ask a couple more questions. Nancy,
Sure.
What are you working on now? Or do you are you constantly writing, or do you take hibernation breaks?
Oh, I do. Well, I do hibernation breaks. I am writing another historical novel. It is, I can't say because we're just working on the contract now. But
okay. Can you tell us what time period it's in?
Yeah,
we won't tell anyone.
Well, it's after the 18th century.
18th century.
Yeah, I love the 18th century. So, and I'm very excited. So I'm in that phase now where I'm doing plotting, and this is the best stage really because it's all possible, and it's all the characters are like a play in my head, and they're all like getting on stage and getting ready to do their stuff. And I haven't gotten to the point where it's like plot hole. Love interest not appealing, and all these things that I always have to work hard on, and that's another thing. I sometimes think that the men, I think they're pretty good, but then somebody will say, they didn't like them. It's like, or they like the dark perverted one more than the good one. She's really in love with.
Yeah, Nancy, I'll tell you, I have these feelings about Dreamland. I like all the male characters, but I feel like I like the person I'm not supposed to like the most.
Ben?
I do like Ben the most.
That's more about you than anything else.
I know it does. Like Ben. He was
Ben.
fun. He was fun to write. I didn't really base him on anyone. Just maybe.
Well, good.
In college, who was very sarcastic and cruel, but he was fun to write. I have to admit it. I guess the bad guys are fun to write. Yeah, he's and he's a bad boy.
I mean, I'll say this every time he gets into the scene, I'm like, ugh, but then I'm like, yes, more Ben.
Here comes Ben, and he's gonna be.
Here comes Ben. I hate him. I love him. It's gonna be creepy. It's gonna be awesome.
Like it.
I like him. I'm gonna crush on him.
Yeah. In my book, The Blue, I have like this really this guy who's a spy master who's just turns out to be really I shouldn't give it away, but he's not a good person at all. And I even in one draft, I have him die.
Harriet, your boys are so sexy.
Your bad boys are so
bad boys.
What you gonna do right there?
And the person who was reading it said, I wish you wouldn't kill him because I kind of, I have the hots for him. I don't want him to die. And I'm like, oh, God. So I guess, I'm writing terrible men that readers kind of want to be with. And that's cool.
Well,
I like it.
I'll say, I don't necessarily want to be with Ben. I say this because my fiance is our producer and listening right now. But no, but I found I'm a character. Like when I read a book, I just really go for the characters, like twisted, wrong, broken. I don't care. So I gravitate towards the ones that I can't figure out what made them so effed up.
Well, there's a lot of twists with him, so you probably haven't gotten all
I know. But I think I just got to one.
Twists are fun.
I know. All right, ladies, Allison, Trisha, do you have any other questions to ask Nancy before we go?
I had one, just because I keep hearing you doing this thing called plotting. So are you a plotter?
Yeah, I don't understand.
Oh, yes. But what happens is that I plot to reduce anxiety.
Okay. So it's basically you type out your Xanax, pop that.
It's Xanax.
Yes.
I like it.
I do.
I take Xanax for that.
Yeah, and I do sort of like the screenwriting rough sort of thing, where point of no return, darkest day before dawn, and then I know these are cliches, but just sort of the rising blah 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 blah. But I'm not like I saw J.K. Rowling. I guess I shouldn't even bring up her name, but I did see some article with her where she had like 50,000 multicolored pads on a bulletin board of all of her subplots and rising falling, and it made me feel really inadequate because I don't take it to that level. I think because I'm such a I love to read, and I've been reading historical fiction since I was a kid, and also I love movies, that I kind of have it in here, sort of a basic, this should happen now. Does that sound stupid?
Yeah.
Sort of a story sense. I follow that, but with one of my Joanna books, I tried to write as a total pantser, and I pantsed my way into a book that was like twice as long as it should have been. That's the problem. Is that
Trisha, we're looking at you.
Trisha, can you share your word count of the last one that you were talking about? You shared it on Facebook, so this is not a revelation. How many words, when you put the two together, how many words were we looking at?
Well, the first one, there was one in a sequel. The first one was 368,000, and the second was 380,000.
Woo!
No, that is a 10-book series.
No.
The Chalice, my second book, was originally 175,000 words. And I was really like, well, and this is so pathetic. Please don't judge. But I'm like, well, George R.R. Martin writes long books. I mean, as if I'm like 1/10 of him. But, I thought, well, people like epics. They like it. And then,
Oh, yes.
I had to foam. People had to go. Chapters had to go. Places had to go. It was really hard.
Well, Nancy,
but
word count varies by genre. So for anybody who's watching and doesn't know, what's kind of the standard for a historical fiction? Because I feel like they tend to be long to begin with.
They do.
So what fiction be coming in around at?
Well, they used to be longer. People used to be able to get away with like 150,000, but about 5 years ago, it started to come down. I don't know if it's printing costs are to like 120,000, and now I think that a lot of people are keeping it 100,000. But when I write suspense. So suspense really has to, if it goes up to 150,000, that's kind of asking a lot of the world. It's really hard to get taught for 150,000. But on the other hand, I read some mysteries that are like barely 60,000, and that's not enough for me. I need more.
Yes, me neither. I forget the line between a novel and a novella, but there have been a few that I've read where I go, This didn't feel like it shouldn't have that LA on the end of this, because this did not feel like a full novel here, but okay.
Right.
But I think that's what reader preferences are going towards, shorter, and their attention spans are like TikTok videos.
Now, right. Yeah. My publisher wants me to keep it shorter. And I think part of the reason is they do market research and they know what readers like. And also, printing costs and all that marketing stuff. You can't just go nuts, but some people, when they get a really long book, they get horrified, but I get excited when I get a really long
I get excited.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, strap me in, take me.
Yes.
I don't, and when you see the reviews, it's so long. I'm like, I want to slap you. Let it be long. Let the writer have the vision. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But let them do their thing.
Well, and there's a difference between long and bloated. And if the reader can't tell the difference, okay, then that's a problem. But, I mean, a book is as long as a book should be. Oh, right. Okay.
And Paulette's new novel.
Yeah. Pat
that's right. That's true.
Paulette's new novel, the prequel to Pillars of Earth, is 900 pages. And I'm assuming this is pages of a hardback book. So
he can do it.
He can get away with it.
Right.
I get away with that.
I love him. So go for it. He's a genius.
But mere mortals like us, we will just get smacked down. So we're not doing that.
Keep it below 100,000 words.
Yeah. I'll tell this real fast. I heard this great story about Ken Follett. He'd done these World War II thrillers, and then he wanted to do this book, but he wouldn't let his agent tell the publisher. He said, I just want my advance and my contract, but don't tell them what it is. And so then he turns in this medieval cathedral building book. And they had to take it. And then it turned into this great success, and they made it into a miniseries with, Donald Sutherland and, all these stars. Yes. And it's big. So, but I thought that was very shrewd. It's like, don't tell them.
Very shrewd.
They just have to take it. Follett book X, and that's it. Well, I don't think anybody can get away with that except Stephen King, maybe.
I was going to say, I think there was a sketch on The Simpsons where Stephen King was pitching his next book, and he literally is sitting there with his agent, and he just grabbed a lamp and he goes, lamp, and they're like,
there you go. And they took it.
No.
Well, we are mere mortals. I hate to stop this because we're having so much fun.
Yes.
My cocktail's done, but Nancy, you have been a joy and wonderful. See, it's not scary to go live.
No, I did it. Yeah. And I did it in a farmhouse with bad Wi-Fi. So
okay. I feel like a lot of us are in farmhouses with bad Wi-Fi right now. Not Allison. She's in Southern California. I was hoping some bats would fly. I have bats. I was hoping they'd fly around and you'd get excited. Oh, I would have loved that.
That would be security effects we'd pay for.
I always have room for bats in my life.
All right, everybody. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on Vox Vomitus. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Allison and Trisha. Next week, we have the fabulous Mary Burton as our guest. And so that is exciting. And the week after that, we have Matt Ruff. So please make sure you're tuning in Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm still confused by Mountain Time, but there are things online that will tell you. Thank you to Roman Saratin, our producer. Thank you to Pam Stack, our executive producer. This has been a copywritten podcast for the Global Authors on the Air Network. Thank you for everybody at our team at Global Authors on the Air, and we will see you next week.